From the studios that brought you Batwoman, Supergirl, and Legends of Tomorrow with puppets, comes Superman and Lois. So today we're going to be looking at the newest of the CW shows, Superman and Lois. Came out, gosh, it was many months ago, and it's just now ending because there were so many delays, which is one of my complaints about the show, but we'll get into that. But anyway, this is going to be just a kind of a quick over review. There will be spoilers, so if you don't want to know and you haven't watched the show yet, just know that going forward, this show will be spoiled. Basically, this show is spinning out of the Supergirl series, where we have seen Superman and Lois in a little bit of stuff, and they've been part of the crossovers, but they haven't really been super prominent outside of that in the Arrowverse, as they were originally on a different Earth, but now, because of Crisis, they're on the same Earth as everybody else, like Flash and everything. But anyway, this show takes place in that universe, but you would never know it, other than basically the only connection is probably the fact that John Diggle cameos in one episode. But the rest of this show does not feel at all like a CW show, which is a good thing at this point. Because if you think back to the original Arrowverse stuff, like the early season, couple seasons of Arrow, maybe season 1 of Flash, maybe more so the Arrow shows, they didn't feel really like CW shows do now. They're very formulaic in how they are. They all are very similar. Pacing, the going out to have the heart-to-hearts in the hallways, and all the different stuff that they typically do in a CW show. And this show didn't feel like that. It felt different, and it was a good different. And with the way that things have been produced, especially in the CW, with them being very likely to shoehorn all sorts of other stuff that just isn't really necessary into shows, this show just seemed like a good, genuine show. And it's like, if they try, they show that people can still make good TV shows, and this show is a good example. It follows Superman and Lois as they're back in Metropolis, about what you'd expect, but they have 2 kids. Slightly different from the comics, where they just had Jordan, but now they have Jordan and Jonathan Kent. So they have 2 kids, they've had twins, and they're starting to, things are changing, they've been laid off, or, well, at least Clark has been laid off. Lois ends up quitting the Daily Planet, and they decide to move back to Smallville to raise their family, and they start to realize that Jordan has powers. Yes, not Jonathan like in the comics, it's Jordan, the new character, who is the one who receives his father's powers. And so he's trying to come to terms with gaining these new powers, and now Superman, who is kind of in the other end, trying to learn and being guided by his father, Jor-El, in the Fortress of Solitude, is now having to reverse those roles and become, and kind of mentor his son into becoming, to terms with these new powers. But it also kind of takes the other route, and it shows, Jonathan, who did not get the powers, kind of having to come to terms with being mortal, being human, being vulnerable to attacks after almost dying several times. And that's kind of where Lois comes in to kind of mentor him in that kind of living with superheroes and how to deal with the fact that, you are human, you are vulnerable, and the things that they face puts you in constant danger. So that's kind of, every one of these characters kind of has an arc of kind of trying to grapple with these different things that their family's being put through. And it really shows something that you don't see a lot in TV and media nowadays, which is a pretty average, basic family, And you don't get a lot of that with just a couple good parents, kids living out, doing their thing, just trying to live their lives. Pretty normal family. And you don't see that a lot in shows anymore, and that kind of gave us this. So we get, the parts where Lois and Clark are dealing with the stuff of the Morgan Edge just coming into Smallville, and it turns out he's actually a Kryptonian, half-brother of Superman. They share the same mother. And so they're dealing with that, but then they're also dealing with, this new character that comes into the scene, who is portrayed as a Luthor, and I I didn't know what they were going to do with this. I did kind of think it was going to be a Lex Luthor from another universe at the beginning, because we already have a Lex Luthor in this universe. And it's eventually revealed that this character is John Henry Irons, who is Steel, which wasn't expecting it until right about they got close to it, and he said his name, was like, oh, Steel. So that was a nice little interesting character that they brought into it, and mystery. But then also he connects with Lois, because on his Earth he was married to Lois. They had a kid, Natalie, and she was killed by Superman on that Earth, who turned evil, which is his kind of the motivation for going after Superman in the beginning of this show, because the same thing that happened on his Earth is starting to happen on this new Earth that he's found himself on. So they really kind of they're put to the test against him before they eventually Morgan Edge reveals his hand and what he's trying to do, and trying to replace the people of Smallville with Kryptonians. And so now they're being affected, their whole town's being affected. And it also brings in the other kind of main characters of the story, which is Lana Lang and her family, who are kind of going through their own struggles and things with their daughter is kind of she turns out being the love interest of Jordan, and she's going through her own thing. She's had problems. Apparently, she even tried to commit suicide, all this different stuff. So she's got her own thing going on. Her dad, Lana's husband, he's had some drinking problems. He's had some tough goes of it, and the town eventually turns on their family. And what I find is refreshing about this is they have these characters like Kyle, which is Lana's husband, and then General Lane, Lois's dad, who come, they have these moments where they're really, they're growing and they're flawed, and they have the point where they could go to them where they could just make them these horrible, unlikable people who never learn, who never can be redeemable, but yet they turn them around and they make them redeemable. They bring them back. They go through their journey and they become these good characters throughout the show. So even these side characters who they could really have painted in a bad light, but they chose not to, and they chose to redeem these characters and bring them back to the fold, which was a nice touch to this. So looking at so it's a CW show, so it's not like super high quality like a movie or anything, but I thought, not from a person who notices bad CGI all the time, I thought it was pretty decent. Superman flying around, fighting, in some of the fights where he fought John Henry or the other Kryptonians and stuff. And I thought that it looked pretty good, for a Superman show. It wasn't anything terrible, at least to me. Some people have a better eye for CGI mistakes and things like that, but I thought it was pretty good for the show. And it was really cool seeing Superman in a show, because the way the Arrowverse has been, they've kind of a long time avoided the big characters. They mentioned hints of Batmans and Supermans and Wonder Womans of the world, but they never quite would go as far as adding them in. But then they added Superman, they added Batman in name anyway. And so it's surprising that we got this show, honestly, because I thought Supergirl was probably the best we were going to get as far as a Superman show. But this turned out to be a really cool show with that. Looking at the costume, I thought the costume was pretty cool. In the other, in Supergirl and the crossovers, they had a different costume. I didn't like it quite as much. I thought this was pretty good. Obviously, it doesn't have the red trunks, and I'm a classic, so that's a little bit of a drawback, but it's still a pretty cool suit, and it really is a pretty cool Superman. When you look at the live action portrayals, I think Tyler Hoechlin does a good job of Superman. He really embodies Superman, throughout the show. The Clark Kent aspects, the Superman aspects, he embodies what you would expect from Superman, truth, justice, and the American way, and all that sort of stuff. It's like, I know, like, you look like Henry Cavill. I think Henry Cavill could be that Superman, but he's not gotten help from the people making these movies to make him that Superman. I thought Tom Welling in Smallville was a good Superman, but he never really got to be Superman, so we can't really call him, like, the best live action, I suppose. So Tyler Hoechlin is probably one of the best, going back to maybe Christopher Reeve Superman, of just the overall Superman Clark Kent dynamic of being who you would expect from Superman. And I think this Superman show really heavily draws from the 2016, I believe, run of Superman, where based right after Rebirth, where they're living in the farm again, and they got Jonathan and the family living there, and he's dealing with his powers and all that sort of stuff. So I feel like that really draws from that, and I really enjoyed that comic book run, so I'm glad that they were able to take some elements from that and incorporate into this show. So it really doesn't fall into the same tropes as a lot of the other CW shows, and it was just an overall enjoyable series. My favorite episode from the show was, I believe, episode 10 it was, where it was like basically a kind of a quick flashback of like all the important events in Clark's life, when he's, going off to find the fortress, when he moves to Metropolis, he meets Lois and all this stuff, and you see him in the original costume back from when he first appeared back in 1938. And that was just a really good embodiment of Superman and the way that they wrote it all, and it was a really cool episode. That made me really happy to see that episode. And that was like my favorite episode. I thought it might be kind of like a filler episode when I saw the previews and the titles and everything. I thought maybe it might be kind of a filler, because CW does do those filler episodes because they drag them on to like 20 some episodes sometimes. But this show I felt good about 15 episodes. It could have maybe crammed it into 13 or 14, but I think it overall worked pretty good. I didn't feel any filler to this, and it was an overall enjoyable show. And obviously, with the state of things in the world, my bar might have been lowered, but I still feel like this is a good, enjoyable show. By far the best superhero show we got this year, and by far the best thing that CW has put out superhero-wise in a long time. And I definitely would recommend checking this show out if you're hesitant. You know who you are, someone I know. So check it out. Let me know what you think. Thank you all for watching. If you like this content, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment what your thoughts were, and I will see you guys next time.